Watson starts the story by explaining why he doesn't try to describe every mystery Sherlock Holmes has ever solved. Some of them didn't require any deduction at all, so they would be boring stories. Some of them were not completely resolved, and Holmes is such a stickler for absolute logical proof he doesn't want them told. Which is fair. Argofont Book Review, Argofont Book Review. This is one of the unresolved mysteries. It seems to be popular enough to disprove Watson's theory that unresolved mysteries make for poor reading. Holmes says he's been beaten 4 times, 3 times by a man and once by Irene Adler. What are the 3 times Holmes has been beaten, I wonder? Not including those 3 times, there are references to 6 untold Sherlock Holmes mysteries. This story really teases readers with mysteries we'll never get to read. A man named John Opensaw arrives at Holmes's house. He tells the story of his uncle Elias, who fought in the American Civil War. About 3 or 4 years later, he retired to the English countryside. He was rather secretive, putting Opensaw in charge of everything, instead of managing his affairs himself. One day, he received a letter from an unknown person with the initials KKK. Inside were 5 orange pips. Elias was terrified for his life, and apparently for good reason. He was found dead not long afterwards. 2 years later, Opensaw's father got a letter from KKK. Inside were 5 orange pips, and an order to put Elias's documents on the sundial. The father dismissed this as a prank, and he was found dead not long afterwards. Opensaw says he just got an identical letter from KKK 2 days ago. He can't follow the instructions because Elias burned all his documents. Holmes warns Opensaw he's in grave danger. He tells Opensaw to go home immediately and leave an explanatory letter for KKK. Which is kind of obvious. Opensaw should have done that on his own. Holmes gets his American encyclopedia, which reveals KKK is not someone's initials. It's the name of a political terrorist group in the United States. This secret society uses orange pips as a death threat. If they send you orange pips in the mail, it's a sign that they're going to kill you unless you leave town immediately. So Holmes solves the mystery by looking up the answer in the encyclopedia. It's certainly not an exciting mystery solution, nowhere near as exciting as the other mysteries. Opensaw is too late. The KKK kills him on the way home. It's too bad that Holmes didn't escort Opensaw as a bodyguard. He probably would have lived if Holmes had done so. Holmes does more research. Cross-referencing the dates on the letters with their postage marks, Holmes determines the letters came from a specific American ship. He thinks the culprits must be on board, but we never learn the truth because the ship crashes before it comes into port. The entire crew is presumed dead. The end. Post-story follow-up. This is sort of the opposite of the previous story, the Boscombe Valley Mystery. That case requires readers to know information which is now obscure. This case requires readers not to know information which is now well known. This is not the author's fault because the KKK was obscure when the story was written. It had been dead for decades. Since then, it's been brought back twice and become more prominent. I, for one, cannot wait for the day when we can once again say the KKK has been dead for decades. It's a terrible group. Even if you can ignore the fact that the mystery solution's now obvious, it's not an interesting mystery solution. Holmes looks up the solution in a book. If all his stories ended that way, Holmes would not be a beloved detective. Could you imagine a mystery book where the detective just looks up everything online? Wow, that would be so boring. This is one of 3 stories in the collection where 90% of the mystery is somebody telling Holmes a long story. The other 2 had better endings. A Question of Identity ends with confronting the culprit, and The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb ends with some new characters and a short investigation. You could argue this story also ends with Holmes investigating, although it doesn't feel like it because Watson's not there when Holmes goes over ship records. The case also feels like a failure because the victim is murdered while Holmes fails to capture the culprits. Your mileage may vary, but I think it's the worst of the stories in the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes book. I give Sherlock Holmes The Five Orange Pips a thumbs down.